The most romantic thing I ever did was write my husband a love note that read, "I love you more than coffee, but I love you more with coffee." And that's pretty much saying a huge amount, because without coffee, I'm not even getting out of bed in the morning. My love story can best be described as a Venn diagram, where on one side you have video game design, and on the other side you have the love that video game design has brought into my life. And in the middle, we have the very real and very likely possibility that I could just burst into song. Because I love video game design so much, it makes me want to sing like a princess in a Disney movie. Now, most love stories begin with "once upon a time," but this isn't most love stories, so let's start with "once upon a MySpace." The year was 2006, and MySpace, the precursor to Facebook, was the place where musicians, students, and tech-savvy creatives hung out. I was working overnights as a counselor for children and going to school full-time during the day at Westfield State, majoring in English, secondary education, and minoring in women's studies. So when I tell you I was tired, I mean I was tired all the way down to the bottom of my soul. So when my husband, who was then a complete stranger, messaged me via MySpace to say, "You're pretty," I didn't have time for that. But he was persistent, and his persistence paid off after I made him jump through several hoops, including a written exam. It had 12 questions. He got one wrong, but still earned my phone number and a date. And what a date it was. It started with coffee, because it needed to, and moved on to lunch. And at some point in between, he made the largest dating mistake. He mentioned marriage on the first date. He said that his lifelong dream was to be part of a husband and wife team that made video games together. I dismissed this because it was a first date, and it's not like I was going to marry the guy. Well, okay. So now I had to figure this out. How was I, a woman who had never really played video games before and had a reputation as a mutton basher, or someone who mashes the buttons and hopes for the best while playing a video game, how was I supposed to write a video game and contribute in a meaningful way? I started with research. The video game industry has netted over $12 billion a year since 2010 and shows absolutely no signs of slowing down. I used to think that video games were just guns and zombies, like the commercials you see on TV from the big AAA companies. But through designing my own video game, writing it, and producing it, I've discovered that there is so much more to them, and there are so many other options out there. Next, I had to begin to learn the terminology. And this was a process of redefining terms that I thought I already knew. Take, for example, the word room. We are all in a room, right? We know this because it has 4 walls, a ceiling, a floor, and at least 1 door. However, in video game design, this is a minimum of 4 rooms. Let me demonstrate. This view of the room, where I am facing all of you, would be 1 room. This view would be another room. This view would be yet another room. And this view would be another room. However, within those 4 rooms, there's the possibility of more rooms. If I click on a window and I can see what's outside, that is another room. If I click on a drawer and it opens and I see the contents inside, then that is yet another room. This was only one of the many terms that needed to be redefined to my poor English literature brain mind. Next, we had decided I don't know why, that while we were just first married and back from our honeymoon and writing my first video game, we would also renovate our home while living in it. Yeah, I still worked overnight, and the contractors would come into and out of my bedroom while I was trying to sleep. They would leave piles of tools and wood all over the house. There was a hole in our roof where the stairs would eventually go, and we had no kitchen for 6 months. So most of the education I mentioned before happened in crowded diners. And my husband would attempt to explain something to me, and I would become confused, and I would force him to draw out what he meant on a diner napkin. So it's safe to say the first year of our marriage, more of our conversations happened on diner napkins than not. Before you ask, no, I didn't save them. They were napkins. I used them to wipe off my face and hands. People always ask. The next step, after I had a basic understanding of video game design, was to get started. So I wrote a script, I hired a crew, I hired actors, I lined up locations, I covered my butt legally with forms and documentation, and got started. The next step is we had to meet all of the crew. This was the first day we all met, when we started planning our grueling game schedule, because my husband is a sadist. Not only were we renovating and I was writing my first game, he gave me a 3-month deadline. To put this in perspective, most indie companies take 1 to 3 years to produce a game. I had 3 months. And this is because he had created 2 games before and knew that timing was everything. And we wanted this game to come out in time for Halloween, which was only 3 months away. Makes sense. Plus he knew that if he didn't give me a hard deadline, I would never do it. After this, we began production. The first challenge we came across was how to animate our characters in the game. So we decided to use chroma key. We created a green screen studio within a friend's office over in the Eastworks building. We dismantled and spray painted a treadmill green. The idea is that we would have our characters walk on the treadmill while videotaping them and remove everything afterwards, and then place the character in the game. We had 1 day and 1 shot to get it all done. We were there until well past dinner, but we did succeed. Next came audio. I thought, audio cake. Everybody knows how to talk, right? The guy we hired to be our big, bad, scary ghost, the one you just saw on the screen, he had very few lines, but he struggled to make them scary. For example, his line was, "Get out." You expect that to be scary in a game. He said it like this: "Get out." How many of you ran for the door? Yeah, neither did I. 20 takes later, I said, "Let's try whispering it." 5 more takes and we got, "Get out." At least that was passable. It took 4 days longer than we had scheduled to do the audio. The last bit, before I passed everything off to my husband and called myself done for the time being, was images. I needed to create images that would further the story of the game. So I took my crew and we went from Look Park in Florence to the Houghton Mansion in North Adams, Massachusetts, where most of the game took place. We even ended up at a barn somewhere in a little town in Connecticut I had never been to before and have never been since. And I gave myself 1 week to edit these photos. I did this with Photoshop and online tutorials, and I aged the photos about 100 years. Then I passed everything off to my husband and called it a day. The video game took 11 days longer than our schedule. The game came out on November 11th, 2009. I equate this whole process to that of giving birth. During much of the process, I was tired, I was uncomfortable, sometimes I was grouchy, The game got bigger every day, and I just wanted it out into the world. But once it got out there, what I've referred to as postpartum depression set in. I'd spent 3 months and 11 days eating, sleeping, and breathing this game. And I was afraid of what the critics were going to say. I missed my crew because I had seen them every day for the last 3 months. And I have learned one should never, ever, under any circumstances, read the comments online. People were making fun of my little game baby. And it really, really bummed me out. And I decided I would never make another video game. But as time goes by, time does what it does, and it puts a silver lining on the past, and it hazes over the difficult bits, and you see the new, shiny baby games that are coming out. And it's like getting bit by the baby bug all over again. So I started working on games. During the time between when Static came out and when I started making games again, my husband had made a deal with a publishing company to make more of his games available to more of the public. And the first game that they wanted was Static Investigator Training, my little game baby. And so my game lived again, this time on Steam, which is an online community where people can go to buy games from indie titles all the way through commercial. It's sort of like if Amazon only sold video games, and if they had forums where people could go to discuss those games. That's what Steam is. And so, the people of Steam, they liked my game a lot better than the people who played it back in 2009. Their biggest complaint? It was too short, and they wanted more. So I started working on my husband's next horror title, 96 Mil. I participated by doing the photography, consulting on the story, the puzzles, and the scares. I also began to work on the sequel to Static. Now these games look entirely different, but I think that just shows how far we've come in the last 8 years. Video game design has given me a new outlook to the world around me. My husband and I still go to diners, we still draw out our ideas on napkins, we still are working on the 3-month production system, but we've become amazing collaborators. I've taught him to seek outside of his circle of friends for help, and with that help he can do more and do it faster. I've introduced him to the horror genre of games that has a ready-made market because people just love a good ghost story. And I've encouraged him to implement new features, new art, and the addition of voice acting into his games. He's grateful that I've helped him achieve his dream, and I'm grateful that he's given me a career that not only I love, but one that utilizes my education. When I was a kid, I used to read those choose-your-own-adventure stories. You remember these. If you choose the path through the woods, turn to page 42. If you take the shortcut through the deep, dark cave, turn to page 66. Video games are just another form of this type of storytelling. We've simply added photos and puzzles to go along with it. Now, if you think that video games don't affect your life, I'm going to wake you up a little bit here and tell you that you're mistaken. Video games are everywhere. They're in schools as simulations for students. Employers are using them to train and teach new skills to their employees. And even the military uses them to strategize and simulate battles. If you have a smartphone and there are apps on that phone, those are there because of video games. If your bank created an app for you to do your banking with, that is an evolution of a piece of code from a video game where someone could go into a store in the game and make a purchase. So video games are everywhere. Now, the largest growing market for video games is women over the age of 50. I'm not kidding. These women have children that have reached an age they're more self-sufficient. And because of this, they have more free time. So they purchase a tablet to read books on. And then they discover the apps. And then the casual games like Solitaire and Candy Crush. From there, they move on to the harder drugs. The hidden object puzzles, which are like word searches, but instead of searching for words, you're looking for objects. And most of these have a plot. And so it's only a tiny little baby step from there to adventure games, like static investigator training. And because of this, people are playing more games. The 50+ audience has become so big that they actually have their own website. It's called GameBoomers.com. I'm not kidding. I think this is great. It shows that the generation gap is completely disappearing. In fact, that site has some of my biggest fans. So, video game design is everywhere, and it's in everything. And it's made me appreciate my life and the world around me. And it's redefined love. Because love, like room, has grown so much and shows that there's so much more within it than what was on the surface. I love what I do. I have my own business. I keep my own schedule. I only choose the jobs that I love. I have this amazing relationship with my husband, one that's unlike anything anyone else has. And I appreciate the world around me because to do the graphics for the game, I get out and take photographs. And those photographs make me look at the world in a new way. I have a closer relationship with people and the world around me because of the bond I have with my crew and the fans who encourage me to do more. And most importantly, I have a new love and respect for myself because I found a career that speaks to me. Did I ever think I would get here? No. I mean, it wasn't even a blip on my radar. I thought I would teach English and do that until I retired, and I would be in debt forever because you don't make a whole lot of money when you teach, and you have to go to school forever. So, I heard you. So I didn't think that I would ever do this. So find that thing that you love, and it might be something you never expected. You have to take a risk. You have to say yes to life. And once you do and you find that thing, your love will expand and you'll see how much more there is behind it. I mean, you love things you never even thought you would love. I mean, if you don't like Brussels sprouts, you're not going to like Brussels sprouts. But you'll love so much more about life. So, in closing, follow your bliss. I followed mine. I'm happy. I smile all the time. Sometimes I wake up smiling, even without coffee.